So today we're going to talk especially about the second reading, in which St. Peter, the first pope, writes this message. He says, "You are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people of his own, so that you may announce the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." So he's calling us, he's drawing us to become this holy temple fitted together. Each one of us are a living stone, is what he says. He says, "Come to me, a living stone. Be yourselves like living stones." A living stone is a stone that's moving. That's what it means. And the way that you built architecturally back in the time of the Bible is you were able to take these stones that were rough and they had lots of edges and stuff, and you would put them in such a way that they would be all, in a sense, the gravity would be pushing them down. They'd be scraping against one another. They'd be, in a sense, like sanding away the rough edges, and in doing that, they would be fitting and interlocking in such a way that they are stronger than many of the structures that we have now, even with concrete and cement. They didn't even use that, but they put them together in this way that they would last for sometimes a millennia. That's what the Lord's calling for us. He's drawing us in. He's calling us to be more united as a family, and that hurts to really experience that sense of letting go of our selfishness, letting go of our ego, these different things, and really becoming this generous family that is not called to just stay put. This is the part that maybe is a little harder. I mean, it's hard enough being drawn together and learning how to die to ourselves and really being fitted together. But in some ways, it's even harder for us to go out. But that's what Jesus is saying through St. Peter about what the church is about. It is a royal priesthood. It's this nation, this people that are called to announce, proclaim him, proclaim Jesus. Because Jesus called us out of darkness into his marvelous light. And if that's good news, then we should share it. But a lot of times we get stuck and we get kind of focused just inwardly. And the danger is we become sort of a club. We become a country club in which we just kind of focus on the nice things that we're doing, and we forget that our whole parish is not summed up in every registered parishioner. Sometimes we think that. It's like, well, the people of St. Mary's, they're all the people that are registered officially. But the Church of St. Mary's is actually the entire territory of all of Plano, all of Newark, all of Millbrook, parts of Yorkville. That's a lot of people. Every single person who lives in those neighborhoods is actually part of our family. And maybe right now, maybe they've had a spiritual amnesia. Maybe there's an injury, spiritually speaking, that they're walking around their neighborhood and they don't know where home is. They don't know their family. And imagine the beautiful news of being able to find one of your family members and be able to look at them and say, "Do you remember me? I'm your brother, I'm your sister." Do you remember that moment? This is just my brain going way out here. But in the story of Star Wars and Return of the Jedi, you have Luke and Leia, this beautiful sibling couple here that, remember what Leia says when she hears that her brother is Luke. She says, "I've always known, somehow, I've always known that you are my brother, even though it was foggy, I didn't know it. And yet I did know it. It's like a dream." That's what we're being called to. We're being called to come up to people and say, "You know that we're family. And you know, we have a Father who loves us. And he was willing to give everything for us as he gave Jesus on the cross. And Jesus is our brother. We're part of his family. And this is the good news that we need to share. But sometimes we get stuck, again, staying focused inwardly. But I want to give you two images that will help us think about how important it is and also the challenge of how to go out. The first one is about space exploration. So we talked about Star Wars, now we're going to talk about Star Trek. Actually, we won't talk about Star Trek, we'll talk about space exploration. Sometimes there is an argument in which space exploration is a waste of time. It's a lot of resources, it's dangerous, we should just shut it down, take all those resources, and take care of our own sphere that has enough problems to deal with. But something that I learned a couple days ago is that when we shooted for the stars, when we looked outside of our sphere, something happened in a special way within our sphere. There are certain technologies that we take for granted that came precisely because of space exploration. One of them is the GPS. You wouldn't have GPS if it wasn't for focusing on the stars. Weather forecasting and the satellites, you wouldn't have that ability. Safer food and cleaner water, because they had to figure out how to make it exceptionally safe and pure in a hostile environment of outer space, it actually translated to a whole nother level of safer water filtration. Robotics, different medical enhancements, different other kinds of technology that we take for granted. But it's precisely because we actually looked out and we're thinking about the mission outward that it actually brought healing and health inward. And that's what we need to think about as a church. If we are focused and we take our flag, our battle flag, and put it outside in the middle of the community and saying, that's where we need to charge forward, well then the ministries that happen here will get realigned to really be about what really matters. If we're shooting for space, all of the other things with mathematics and physics and all of those things, they have to align so that we can actually get out there. But if we have our flag planted interiorly, then we'll always get focused in on ourselves, and we won't really have the percentage of time to think about all of the rest of our family that's hungering to know Jesus Christ. This is why each one of us has to rediscover a mission heart, to realize by your baptism and by your confirmation, you're called to be empowered here, to become that spiritual temple, to be brought into the heart of worship, and to allow the Eucharist to cleanse our hearts so we can become a strong family of faith, and then soaked with that Holy Spirit, be shot out into our community to rescue and seek and save the lost and those who have forgotten who they are. But it's hard to do that. And this is, I think, where the other analogy that I want to give you is how we get stuck. Now, yesterday, I went to a family's house and they have this little dog, this little puppy, who's super fast, and we were playing fetch. If you have dogs, you know how this goes. You pick up the ball, you throw it, the dog goes, gets it, and then turns around and puts it right there and says, what do I do now? And you pick it up again, and you keep doing that. Now, what happens, though, if you take the ball and you just put it away? Then the dog will be like, okay, I guess the game is over. I go do something else. Sometimes we are, in many ways, we are all like little puppies. The way that we operate in the church is when we're excited to do something, we wait for whoever the kind of official people are, whether it's the pastor or a deacon or someone who's kind of in charge of something, and we kind of wait, and we kind of run up and be like, okay, what's the little assignment that I need to do? And then we go for it, and then we come back and say, well, what do I need to do next? And if for some reason they get bottlenecked or busy, or they just put the ball away, then we're just kind of like, okay, I guess the game's over. Don't we do this? But what would happen if the little puppy, bringing it back and forth, actually instead took up the ball and started playing fetch with someone else? They learned how to do it, but then they didn't just say, okay, what's next? But they said, actually, I'm called and I'm empowered to now pick up the ball and to throw it and to teach someone else how to fetch. Do you see how there's this trickle effect? And this is something, sometimes we wait for, let's say, like the official Bible study or the official movement in the parish, and yet what the Lord is telling each one of you is each one of you have people that are in your circle of influence, starting with your family, and starting maybe with your neighbor, or whoever it is. Instead of waiting to get started and to say, okay, when do we start? Just start. Pick up the ball and start playing fetch with someone else. And that could be something as simple as getting some of your friends or people that you walk with, maybe literally walk around with, or maybe walk your dogs with, I don't know. And maybe just pick out the podcast, A Bible in a Year. Listen to it, talk about it. It could be something as simple as that. It could be something as a family to see your family as missionary. Meaning, think about who's in your community that is in need of love, that is in need of knowing that they're not forgotten. And maybe as a family, just take it upon yourself to adopt them. Make a meal for them. Bring your children and grandchildren and spend time and talk and pray with them. God can do amazing things through these little tiny things that sometimes we get paralyzed because we're like the little puppy dogs, that we know how to do the fetch game, but then we actually have never picked up the ball and started it ourselves. And that's what the Lord is saying here. You are a chosen people called to announce these wonderful works of him who called you into darkness, out of darkness into his marvelous life. So that's your homework. We are puppy dogs. We've played the game of catch for a long time, but now it's time to pick up the ball yourself and find someone to play catch with.